My brother-in-law said the abortion pills you put in her are working perfectly. I was on a cruise with my in-laws when everything changed. We were sitting at this outdoor table on the pool deck, the sun was setting, and I had a beer in my hand. My wife Olivia was right next to me, getting ready to take her evening vitamins like she did every single night. That's when my brother-in-law Tino turned to his girlfriend Clara and said something that made my blood run cold. The abortion pills you put in her vitamins are working perfectly. He said in this secret language from my wife's childhood, a regional dialect that barely exists in written form, one she taught me years ago during late nights when she'd tell me stories about growing up with her twin brother. She couldn't remember much of it anymore through the fog of PTSD from 7 miscarriages over 4 years. But I remembered every word she'd taught me. My hand froze on my beer bottle. I just sat there staring at nothing while my brain tried to process what I'd just heard. Tino kept talking, getting cockier with every sentence. There's only a month until Grandpa's will reading. If she doesn't have kids by then, we'll get $4 million. Clara actually cackled like this was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. Your plan to make sure she's not pregnant was genius. I ain't getting no measly 600,000. I looked at Olivia. She was sitting right there next to me, completely oblivious, reaching for the pill bottle on the table. Her evening vitamins that she took religiously every single night without fail. I felt my stomach drop because I knew exactly what was in those pills now. I did the only thing I could think of in that moment. I sprawled across the table like I was way too drunk on mimosas, knocking everything over. Glasses crashed, plates clattered, and Olivia's vitamin bottle went flying across the deck. Everyone jumped up and started yelling at me to be careful. Olivia grabbed napkins to clean up the mess, while Tino and Clara just laughed at how wasted I was. You see, I knew I couldn't tell Olivia right then. After our 5th loss, she tried to jump off our apartment balcony at 3 in the morning, screaming that her body was a graveyard. I'd pulled her back from the edge while she fought me and cried, and Tino had been the one to talk her down in that same secret language. He'd spent an hour on our balcony convincing her that her body wasn't broken, that sometimes these things just happen, that she needed to keep trying. How do you tell someone that the person who saved their life has been systematically destroying it for years? That night, I waited until everyone was asleep. The ship was quiet except for the sound of waves, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking as I went through Olivia's bags. I found her vitamin bottles and swapped every single pill with sugar pills I'd bought from the ship's convenience store. My mind was racing the whole time because she was already pregnant again. We just found out a week before the cruise, but hadn't told anyone yet. We were being cautious after so many losses. The next morning at breakfast, I watched Tino closely. I mentioned casually that Olivia had felt nauseous this morning and maybe it was morning sickness. He completely choked on his coffee, coughing and sputtering. Clara muttered something in their secret language about needing to up the dose. I understood every word and felt sick. Then came the moment during lunch when Olivia suddenly grabbed her stomach and winced. It was just food poisoning from some cheap sushi she'd eaten, but Tino's face absolutely lit up. He actually fist-bumped Clara under the table like they'd just won something. In their language, he whispered, "We're gonna be rich, baby." Clara looked at Olivia's retreating form as she headed to the bathroom and asked in their language, "Do you ever feel, I don't know, a little bad about this?" Tino snorted. "For what?" After the will reading, she can pop out as many as she wants. 7 miscarriages, though. He paused and took a sip of his champagne. 7 necessary business decisions. I sat there pretending to look at my phone while every muscle in my body tensed. 7. He'd said 7 like he was proud of it. Like ending 7 pregnancies was some kind of accomplishment that proved how smart he was. The next day, I was refilling drinks at the pool bar when I overheard Tino on a video call with his biggest client. The guy's name was Chandler, and they were clearly arguing about something. Tino's voice got louder and angrier until he finally shouted, "You know what, Chandler? Go fuck yourself. I don't need your peasant money anymore." I walked over with a mojito after he hung up, playing innocent. "Rough day. Best day of my life," he slurred. He was already drunk before noon. "Go to be so rich, I could buy 10 companies like that dump. Don't you want to wait until you actually get the wolf first?" I asked carefully. Don't count your chickens before they hatch." He laughed in this way that made him sound completely unhinged. "Poor people wait. Rich people plan. Big difference." That's when Clara grabbed his arm and whispered in their secret language, "If you're so sure the pills worked, why wait? Let's celebrate now." She dragged him toward the ship's luxury boutique, and I watched from a distance as he maxed out credit card after credit card. By day 3, he'd completely lost it with entitlement and confidence. I watched him march up to the cruise director's desk, demanding to sign up for their Pinnacle Elite membership. 150,000, the director said carefully. No problem, Tino slurred, signing the contract without even reading it. His stupidity actually made me gasp. In just a few days, he'd already spent his entire inheritance allowance on useless garbage. Designer clothes, electronics, that cruise membership, fancy dinners. All of it adding up while he acted like the money was already sitting in his bank account. That afternoon at the buffet, when staff asked him to wait in line like everyone else, he completely exploded. "Do you know who I am?" he screamed at this poor teenage server. "I'm about to own this cruise line. You're all fired." Security had to escort him back to his cabin while other passengers filmed the whole thing on their phones. I made a mental note to get copies of that footage later. The final night's dinner was almost perfect. Tino stood up swaying in his wine-stained designer shirt and shouted, "A toast to new beginnings and successful business ventures." That's when Olivia lurched from her chair with her hand over her mouth, racing for the bathroom. Tino actually smirked and announced in English, "Too much rich food for her delicate stomach." Then he added in the secret language to Clara, "Finally, I thought those pills would never work." The ship's doctor I'd quietly confided in 3 days earlier followed Olivia into the bathroom. They came back an hour later, both smiling huge, and the doctor was holding an ultrasound photo. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Murphy. The ultrasound confirms you're 12 weeks pregnant with twins." I picked Olivia up and spun her around while she laughed and cried at the same time. The color drained from Tino's face like someone had pulled a plug. He just sat there with his mouth open staring at us. He stammered. "That's impossible." The dose's eye, she took every head in the dining room, turned to face him. I stood up slowly, and the words were forming in my mind, ready to destroy him in the language he thought was his secret weapon. But I closed my mouth and sat back down, letting the moment pass. Everyone around us started clapping and congratulating us about the twins. I pulled Olivia close while watching Tino's face cycle through confusion and panic. He kept looking at me like he expected me to say something, but I just smiled and nodded at all the well-wishers crowding our table. The smart play wasn't burning him in front of everyone right then. It was building a case so tight he couldn't wiggle out of it later. Because Olivia's health mattered more than my immediate satisfaction. I waited until the crowd thinned and Tino stood up to leave. Then I grabbed his elbow and pulled him close. In the secret language, I whispered that his little plan didn't work, and I knew everything he'd done. His eyes went huge and his face turned completely white, but I kept my voice calm and quiet. I told him to enjoy his last few weeks of freedom before everything came crashing down. He tried to stammer something back, but I just patted his shoulder and walked away, leaving him standing there shaking. After dinner wrapped up and Olivia went to the bathroom, I found Dr. Conrad near the ship's medical office. I pulled him into an empty conference room and explained the whole vitamin swap I'd done 3 days ago, showing him the original bottles I'd kept hidden in my bag. He listened without interrupting, then pulled out his tablet and started typing an official medical note. He documented when I'd first confided in him about Tino's behavior and the protective steps I'd taken to swap the pills. He printed it out, signed it, and handed me a copy. This paper trail showed exactly when I discovered the problem and what I did to protect my wife. I thanked him and headed straight to the security office on deck 3. The security officer who'd handled Tino's buffet meltdown was at her desk reviewing camera feeds. I explained I needed the footage preserved for potential legal action. She pulled up her system and confirmed they could hold everything for 90 days if I filed a formal report. I filled out the paperwork right there, giving detailed descriptions of Tino's threatening behavior and his screaming at staff members. She stamped it with a case number and promised the footage was now flagged in their system. Walking back toward our cabin, I spotted Clara standing alone by the railing on deck 7, staring out at the ocean. She looked genuinely shaken up, not her usual cocky self. Back in our room, Olivia jumped in the shower to wash off the day. I immediately pulled out the swap pill containers from my hidden bag pocket. I photographed them from every angle with my phone's camera, making sure the timestamps were visible in each shot. I uploaded everything to 3 different cloud storage accounts because I'd watched enough crime documentaries to know evidence had a way of disappearing when you needed it most. The next morning, I woke up early and heard Tino's voice near the hot tub, bragging to Clara in the secret language about the custom Tesla he'd already picked out. He described this downtown condo with floor-to-ceiling windows like the money was already sitting in his bank account. I stood behind a decorative palm plant with my phone out, recording every word. Later at the breakfast buffet, I watched Clara pull Tino aside and suggest in the secret language that they should up the dosage to make absolutely sure it worked. I was already standing behind another plant with my phone recording. I captured every single word of their casual conversation about poisoning my wife. The night before we disembarked, I barely slept, lying awake planning every detail of what came next. The next morning, we packed in silence, and I made sure to grab every piece of evidence. The ship's crew thanked us for sailing with them, completely unaware of everything that had unfolded. Tino was waiting near the gangway with Clara. He stepped forward like he wanted to hug Olivia goodbye, but she turned away to grab her purse. I stepped between them and locked eyes with him, letting him see exactly how much I knew. His face went pale, and he mumbled something about traffic before rushing away. The 3-hour drive home stretched ahead of us. I kept glancing at Olivia sleeping against the window, her face peaceful. My mind kept running through different versions of how to tell her the truth. Every version I practiced in my head sounded terrible, like something that would shatter her completely. I thought about her standing on our balcony after the 5th miscarriage, screaming that her body was broken. How do you tell someone that the person who saved their life also spent years trying to end it? By the time we pulled into our driveway, I decided to find a therapist before saying anything. I helped Olivia inside, and she went straight to the couch, curling up with her hand on her belly. She started talking about baby names, suggesting options for boys and girls. I sat down next to her and smiled, participating in the conversation while my stomach twisted with guilt. That night, after she fell asleep, I grabbed my laptop and spent 2 hours organizing every piece of evidence. I created folders for the audio recordings, photos of the pills, crew's incident reports, and medical documentation. I backed everything up to 3 different cloud storage accounts. I made a master document with timestamps for every recording and links to all the supporting evidence. The next morning, I started searching for certified translators online. The secret language wasn't common, and I called 6 different services with no luck. On the 7th call, the receptionist mentioned Sapphira Wyatt, a legal translator who handled rare languages. I sent her a sample recording, and she called back within an hour confirming she could do it. While on the phone with Sapphira, I remembered Dr. Conrad mentioning a high-risk OB/GYN back home. I called their office and explained Olivia's history of 7 losses. The receptionist's voice changed when I mentioned the number, becoming softer and more urgent. They could fit us in within 48 hours. 2 days later, we sat in the high-risk OB/GYN's office while the doctor pulled up Olivia's medical history. She scrolled through slowly, her face getting more serious with each page. 7 documented losses over 4 years. The doctor started asking detailed questions about each pregnancy, and I watched Olivia's hands twist together as she answered. After 20 minutes, the doctor explained that Olivia's case qualified as recurrent pregnancy loss. We need weekly ultrasounds and progesterone supplements. Then she looked at both of us directly and said stress management wasn't optional anymore. It was medical treatment. Olivia needed to treat rest and calm as seriously as taking vitamins. The following week, I drove us to therapist Faye Holloway's office for the emergency intake session I'd scheduled. Faye had soft lighting and comfortable chairs that didn't feel clinical. She spent the first 15 minutes just talking with Olivia about the pregnancy before turning to me and asking what brought us in for an emergency session. My mouth went dry. I started with the cruise, explaining we'd gone with family. Then I told them about overhearing a conversation in the secret language about abortion pills, about Clara putting them in Olivia's vitamins, about the inheritance. Olivia's face went completely blank for a moment. Then her eyes got huge. I kept talking, explaining how I'd swapped the pills immediately and documented everything. Olivia stood up suddenly, her chair scraping. Her face cycled through confusion, then denial, then understanding hit and pure horror. She started screaming that her brother had killed her babies, all 7 of them, for money. Then she whirled on me and screamed that I'd known for over a week and hadn't told her. That everyone in her life was a liar. Her breathing got faster and shallower. Faye moved closer, speaking in a calm voice about breathing and grounding. It took almost 10 minutes before the panic subsided. We spent the next hour and a half working through what happens next. Faye created a clear plan with 3 columns for safety, evidence, and eventual confrontation. By the end of the session, we had something that felt manageable instead of crushing. That evening, I sat down and prepared the audio files to send to Sapphira. I filled out release forms and wrote a detailed email explaining who the speakers were and why we needed certified translation. The upload took almost 20 minutes. Sapphira responded within an hour confirming receipt and explaining the legal certification process would take about 10 days. Our second OBGYN appointment came a week later. The doctor asked specific questions about the vitamins Olivia had been taking. She explained that chronic stress from repeated losses could impact pregnancy outcomes. She prescribed relaxation techniques and referred us to prenatal yoga. Then she looked at us seriously and said Olivia needed to avoid emotional upheaval as much as possible. 2 days later, I contacted attorney Lucian Mansfield. His office was downtown, and when I explained the situation, his assistant said he could see us the following week. The consultation happened in his conference room with a city view. He read through Grandfather Thaddeus's will carefully. After 15 minutes, he explained something I hadn't understood. The will had a discretionary conduct clause that gave the trustee power to delay or deny distributions if an heir's behavior caused harm to other family members. This was more powerful than the pregnancy deadline because it focused on Tino's actions rather than Olivia's pregnancy status. That same afternoon, an email from the cruise security office arrived with the full incident report and footage timestamps. Everything was documented with official letterhead and case numbers. I downloaded it all to 3 different backup locations. The next week, Olivia and I went back to Faye's office. This time, Faye focused on rebuilding trust between us after my delayed disclosure. She asked why I'd waited over a week to tell Olivia. I explained I was scared she'd spiral. Faye explained my protective instinct wasn't wrong, but the execution was because I'd made a unilateral decision. We spent an hour creating specific agreements about communication going forward. I promised to share information immediately even if I was scared. 2 days later, an email from Sapphira landed with a preliminary transcript. My hand started shaking as I read through it. She'd found 12 separate conversations where Tino and Clara discussed the poisoning in detail. That afternoon, Olivia sat with her phone typing and deleting the same message to Tino over and over. After 20 minutes, she showed me the final version. It said she needed space to focus on her health and wouldn't be in contact until after the will reading. Her thumb hovered over send for a full minute before she pressed it. The next morning, Tino's name lit up Olivia's phone at 7 a.m. She walked over slowly and stared at the screen, tears forming. When it finally stopped, a voicemail notification popped up. Olivia didn't listen. She went into settings and blocked his number without saying a word. 3 hours later, Clara sent a text saying she was sorry if anything seemed weird on the cruise. No mention of pills, just this careful non-apology. Olivia screenshot it and added it to our evidence folder. Our weekly ultrasound showed both babies looking good, but the doctor frowned at Olivia's blood pressure reading. The second reading came back even higher. The doctor said the numbers were creeping into a concerning range. She cut Olivia's work hours to part-time and scheduled twice-weekly monitoring. That afternoon, Lucian called with information about the will that changed everything. The discretionary conduct clause meant Olivia's pregnancy status wasn't actually the controlling factor. The trustee could pause or deny funds to any heir whose behavior harmed another family member. Even if Tino thought he'd won, the trustee could still investigate and hold his money indefinitely. Over the next week, I turned our spare bedroom into a war room. I organized everything chronologically with doctor's notes, security reports, bank statements, photos, and Sapphira's transcripts. The final dossier was 60 pages long. I printed 5 copies and saved digital versions in 3 cloud accounts. 10 days later, Sapphira sent the completed certified translation with a notarized affidavit. Her certification made the transcript valid evidence in court proceedings. Every morning for 2 weeks, I heard Olivia practicing what she'd say to Tino. She stood in front of the mirror with her hands on her belly, saying the words until she could do it without crying. 3 days before the will reading, Lucian called with strategic advice. He said we shouldn't ambush Tino at the reading because that could make us look vindictive. Instead, we should share evidence privately with the trustee beforehand. Olivia agreed that letting professionals handle it was smarter. 2 days later, Clara sent me a direct message through Instagram. She needed to talk privately and hinted she had information. I showed Olivia, and we both knew Clara was trying to save herself. I suggested meeting at a coffee shop downtown. The next day, Clara showed up looking terrible with dark circles under her eyes. She started talking fast, saying Tino had pressured her into helping. She claimed he'd told her the vitamins were just to prevent pregnancy, not cause miscarriages. I didn't buy it, but let her talk. She said she had the remaining poison and screenshots of texts. Then she asked if handing everything over would keep her out of jail. I told her I couldn't make promises, but evidence would matter. I left and walked straight to my car to call Lucian. He said he couldn't grant immunity, but could note her cooperation. Clara and I met again the next day. She brought a folder with photos of pill packaging and text conversations. She kept her own bottle of the poison. Her hands shook the whole time. That week in therapy, Faye helped us talk through Claire's cooperation. She reminded us our main goal was safety and accountability, not revenge. By the end, we felt more centered. 2 days later, at our ultrasound, the doctor said both babies were growing on schedule, but explained real risks with twin pregnancy. Preeclampsia, premature delivery. Everything looked good, but we needed to be careful. The following week, Lucian scheduled a private meeting with Dex from the trustee's office. On the day of our meeting, we brought the complete evidence packet. Dex read through everything carefully, his expression getting more serious. After 20 minutes, he said this was thorough work and promised to investigate completely before distributing money. 3 days before the will reading, an envelope arrived from the cruise line's legal department. Inside was a formal letter describing Tino's behavior during the cruise. This documentation from a neutral third party made our case even stronger. 2 days later, Sapphira confirmed she could attend the will reading in person. Having the certified translator present meant Tino couldn't argue the transcripts were fake. The next afternoon, Lucian coached us through different scenarios for the reading. He made us practice staying calm and referring questions to him. 3 days before the reading, Clara sent a written statement through her lawyer admitting her role. It was self-serving, but still helped our case. The night before the reading, Olivia and I talked about what we actually wanted. We were both exhausted. She said she didn't want some big dramatic moment. She just wanted the trustee to handle everything professionally. On the morning of the will reading, we met with Dex privately. We brought the final evidence packet, and he read through everything carefully. His expression got serious with each page. He promised to handle the distribution, hold announcement professionally. In the lobby, other family members started arriving. Tino walked in wearing a designer suit and flashing a luxury watch. He was whispering to Clara in the secret language about his guaranteed payout. He looked so confident, like he'd already won. The reading began exactly on time. Lucian outlined the will structure and explained the discretionary conduct clause. Tino barely paid attention, scrolling through his phone. Then Dex stood up and announced that Tino's distribution was temporarily on hold pending review of materials about his conduct. The room went completely silent. Tino's face shifted from bored confidence to confused panic. He jumped up, demanding to know what materials and who submitted them. That's when Sapphira stood up from the back. She introduced herself and explained she'd translated recordings from a family cruise. She started reading from a certified transcript in a calm voice. She read Tino's exact words about the abortion pills working perfectly. She read their discussion about the $4 million inheritance. She read Clara's response about not wanting $600,000. She read them calculating how to split the money. Tino's parents gasped. Clara started crying. Tino's face went from angry red to sick white as his own words condemned him. Then Olivia stood up with shaking hands but firm voice. She'd prepared a statement with Faye's help. She said she knew everything and had evidence. She wouldn't have contact with Tino until all legal matters were resolved. Her voice cracked, but she kept going. She said her brother had tried to kill her babies for money, and she would never forgive that. When she finished, she sat down and grabbed my hand. I'd never been more proud. That afternoon, Lucian drove us to the police station. The detective listened to everything and spent 20 minutes reviewing our evidence. When she looked up, she said the quality of evidence made this a strong case. Within 48 hours, Clara called the detective and turned over remaining pills and screenshots. 3 days later, Tino's attorney called asking about plea negotiations. He said the evidence was too strong to fight. Tino needed to accept responsibility and stay away from Olivia. That same afternoon, Dex called saying Tino's funds would stay paused until all criminal proceedings finished. 2 weeks later, at our next appointment, the doctor said Olivia's blood pressure was up again. We needed to take stress reduction very seriously. The doctor said twin pregnancies were high risk and we couldn't take chances. In our next therapy session, Faye made me face how I'd waited to tell Olivia instead of telling her immediately. She explained I'd put my judgment above Olivia's right to know. Olivia said she understood I was trying to protect her, but keeping secrets made her feel like she couldn't trust me. A month after the will reading, the prosecutor offered Tino a plea deal: 3 years probation, therapy, and repaying medical costs. The next week, Dex explained the trust would set specific conditions for any future money to Tino tied to completing therapy and making payments. It could be 5 years or more. When Olivia reached her third trimester, she started having contractions at 34 weeks. We rushed to the hospital, and the twins were born weighing 4 pounds each. They spent 2 weeks in the NICU before coming home. While we were doing the NICU routine, a letter arrived from Tino forwarded through his attorney. He'd been sober for 2 months and going to therapy. He said he knew he'd hurt Olivia and was working on becoming better. Olivia read it slowly, then folded it up. She said maybe someday she'd be ready to respond, but not today. After the babies came home, we had another session with Faye to work out contact boundaries. We decided Tino's parents could visit at our house with us present. Tino himself would have zero contact until he finished probation. 3 months later, an envelope arrived from Dex's office. Tino remained under monitored rehabilitation with no access to funds. The trust would review annually for at least 5 years. Our family received a modest grant for medical expenses totaling $12,000. Now I'm sitting in our living room at midnight with both twins finally asleep. Olivia is curled up next to me, looking worn out but genuinely calm. We didn't get some perfect ending. What we got was boundaries at work, 2 healthy babies, and knowledge that when it mattered, I protected them the best I knew how. Olivia's hand rests on my arm, and she's half asleep but smiling slightly. And I know we're going to be okay.
New stories every day. You know where to find me.